What these seasoned firefighters couldn't possibly know was that their biggest mistake wasn't questioning her renovation skills. It would be underestimating what she was about to discover locked away in the chief's office records that would shake national security to its core. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The weathered brick facade of Station 37 stood as a forgotten landmark in the riverside district of Pinewood Valley. Its faded red doors and tarnished brass fixtures told stories of decades when this Oregon mountain community thrived as a logging and mining hub. Those prosperous times had vanished nearly 20 years ago when the regional timber industry collapsed, leaving behind a struggling town of skilled workers, searching for a new purpose in an economy that no longer valued their traditional expertise. Among the municipal buildings abandoned during budget cuts was the historic Pinewood Valley Fire Station 37, its equipment base silent after housing generations of firefighters and emergency vehicles. The once proud station had served the community since 1952, but economic realities and district consolidation had rendered it obsolete, at least in the eyes of city planners, focused on spreadsheets rather than community heritage. The monthly meeting of the Pinewood Valley Preservation Committee was in full swing at MacCready's Diner, a local institution where handshake agreements still carried more weight than legal contracts, and community concerns were debated over plates of homemade pot pie. Coffee mugs clinked against worn Formica tables while the aroma of fresh baked bread mingled with conversations about how to revitalize their struggling downtown district. Richard Donnelly, whose family had operated Donnelly's Hardware for 3 generations, commanded attention from his usual corner booth. At 58, his calloused hands and practical demeanor testified to decades spent providing tools and advice to homeowners throughout the valley. The Donnelly name was synonymous with reliable service in Pinewood Valley, their green and gold sign a landmark on River Street since 1967. The city finally put Station 37 up for auction after sitting vacant for 6 years now. Richard announced to the gathered community leaders, gesturing toward the window that faced the old fire station across the town square. Starting bid was $10,000, but they couldn't get a single serious offer. Not surprising, nodded Eleanor Winters, who ran Winters Real Estate from the Victorian office her grandfather had established after returning from World War II. Her family had been the go-to resource for property transactions in Pinewood Valley for 70 years, building relationships throughout the region. That building's been deteriorating since the roof damage in the 2019 snowstorm. The repair estimates alone scared off most potential investors. The building in question, formerly Pinewood Valley Fire Station 37, occupied a prominent corner location with excellent visibility from the town square. The property had been struggling with mounting maintenance issues, outdated infrastructure, and accumulated neglect that had overwhelmed the municipal budget. Local contractors estimated it would require substantial investment just to bring the historic structure up to current safety codes. Who's going to want that headache? Asked James Holbrook, whose family construction business had been building homes in the valley since the 1970s. Place needs new electrical, updated plumbing, and probably asbestos remediation. You're looking at 6 figures minimum before you could even think about occupying the space legally. Before Richard could respond, Eleanor's assistant Marissa, who managed the digital presence for several local businesses, joined the conversation with news that caught everyone's attention. Someone already bought it, she said, lowering her voice despite the diner's bustling atmosphere. Came into our office yesterday asking about commercial zoning regulations and adaptive reuse permits. Some woman who's never owned property in the valley before. A murmur of surprise rippled through the group. Station 37 had been a discussion topic for years, with its asking price steadily dropping as potential buyers were scared off by the extensive renovation requirements and questionable return on investment. The building inspector had flagged numerous violations, and rumors about structural issues had further complicated any potential sale. A woman? Richard's wife Diane raised an eyebrow as she slid into the booth beside her husband. Diane managed the financial side of Donnelly's hardware and understood better than most how challenging property renovation had become, with rising material costs and labor shortages affecting the entire construction industry. "What's her background?" asked Eleanor, genuine curiosity mixing with professional skepticism. Real estate development in Pinewood Valley was built on local knowledge and proven resources. Newcomers faced an uphill battle earning trust from both contractors and community members. "Some kind of historical preservation specialist, apparently," Marissa replied, checking her notes thoughtfully. "Said something about adaptive reuse and community-centered restoration. Had academic credentials from that architectural conservation program at the university. Kept talking about honoring the building's legacy while creating functional community space." James Holbrook gave a dismissive snort. "Honoring legacy? You mean underestimating costs and abandoning the project halfway through when reality hits? That's how these academic types operate. They have grand visions without practical understanding." "If she can even secure the permits," Eleanor added. "That building's mechanical systems were outdated when analog phones were still current. The electrical panel alone is a complete replacement job." "Did anyone ask what she paid for it?" Diane inquired, her accountant's instincts focusing on the financial aspects. "The city was asking $80,000 last I heard, which was already a massive reduction considering the land value alone." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marissa's expression conveyed her disbelief before she spoke. $800. $800? Richard repeated, nearly choking on his coffee. "The brass fixtures alone are worth more than that, even as scrap metal." The group exchanged glances of amazement and suspicion. Such an absurdly low price suggested either desperate circumstances on the seller's side, or hidden problems that made the property essentially worthless. Municipal buildings in Pinewood Valley, even in declining condition, typically commanded prices reflecting their historic value and central locations. "She's got a teenage daughter too," Marissa continued. Girl seemed interested in the buildings. History, asking about the station's role during the flood of '74, and whether the community archives had photos of the original crew. "No husband?" Eleanor asked, though her tone suggested professional curiosity rather than gossip. "Didn't mention one. Just the two of them looking like they're starting completely over. Said something about leaving Seattle after corporate restructuring, made her reevaluate her priorities." Richard shook his head with the certainty of someone who had witnessed many renovation projects fail over the years. "I give her 6 months tops. Remember that couple from Portland who tried to convert the old mill into artist studios back in 2018? Ran out of money before they even finished demolition." The conversation might have continued along these predictable lines, but the diner's front door opened with its characteristic jingle, admitting a gust of pine-scented mountain air, and the last person any of them expected to see at a gathering of established Pinewood Valley business owners. Morgan Chun stood in the doorway, scanning the room with perceptive hazel eyes that missed nothing. At 36, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to assessing historic structures and developing practical preservation strategies. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and while her clothes were clearly new work boots, durable jeans, and a flannel shirt that hadn't yet acquired the characteristic wear of daily labor, there was nothing pretentious about her appearance. Beside her stood a teenager with her mother's analytical expression, but sporting blue highlights in her hair that marked her as someone unafraid to stand out in a traditional town. The girl carried a tablet computer and wore wireless earbuds, her expression oscillating between supportive enthusiasm and teenage embarrassment at being dragged to this gathering of adults she'd never met. The pair hesitated momentarily, taking in the room full of strangers who had suddenly fallen silent at their entrance. Morgan took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked directly toward the group of business owners who had just been discussing her inevitable failure. "Good afternoon," Morgan said as she approached, her voice carrying a slight trace of an academic's precision, but projecting confidence that contradicted her newcomer status. "I'm Morgan Chun, the new owner of Station 37. I was hoping to introduce myself to the community leaders." She extended her hand to Richard, who seemed to be the center of the group's attention. Her plan sounded reasonable in theory, but they had all seen the harsh realities of renovation destroy better prepared operations. Yet something about her direct manner and evident preparation left them feeling slightly less certain of her failure than they had been before meeting her. She was clearly no dilettante playing at preservation. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. $50 says she's gone by Christmas," James murmured to Marisa as they watched Morgan introduce herself to the town librarian. Marisa considered this, watching as Morgan listened intently to the older woman's stories about the station's role in community history. "I don't know," she said slowly. "There's something about her. I'm not saying she'd definitely make it, but I'm not betting against her either." Richard, overhearing them, said nothing, but he made a mental note to check his storage shed for other period-appropriate hardware that might assist a restoration project operating on minimal capital, just in case. 2 weeks after the preservation committee meeting, Morgan stood in the cavernous equipment bay of Station 37, surveying the progress they'd made and the challenges that remained. The building around her showed signs of gradual transformation. Scaffolding supported workers replacing damaged ceiling panels. Freshly scrubbed brick walls revealed their original warm color, and thoroughly cleaned windows allowed natural light to flood the space for the first time in years. But significant problems persisted. The electrical system continued throwing breakers whenever they used multiple power tools. The ancient boiler made concerning noises when building pressure, and the roof still leaked near the communications room during heavy rainfall. Like everything else in the former fire station, each repair revealed 3 more issues hidden beneath. The engineering report that had arrived that morning confirmed her suspicions about the building's mechanical systems. Before she could install the climate control necessary for preserving historical exhibits, the entire EVAC infrastructure would need upgrading at a cost of nearly $18,000 money she simply didn't have in her carefully planned budget. She was studying the contractor's estimate when the familiar sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Eleanor Winter's SUV bearing the distinctive Winters Real Estate logo pulled into the freshly cleared parking lot. "Morning, Morgan," Eleanor called as she climbed out of the vehicle. Her tone had warmed considerably since their initial meeting, though it still carried the measured caution of someone waiting to see if first impressions would prove accurate. "Good morning, Eleanor. I wasn't expecting visitors today." "Brought those station photographs we discussed," Eleanor replied, retrieving a leather portfolio from her passenger seat. "Found them in our archive while researching another property. Thought they might help with your restoration details." "I appreciate you making the effort," Morgan said, watching Eleanor navigate around stacks of reclaimed lumber. "Historical accuracy matters, especially for a building that meant so much to the community." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Smart perspective. Though you might find some locals don't care about preservation if it adds to project timeline or costs. Maybe, but I suspect more people value their heritage than we realize. They just haven't been shown how it connects to their present." As they moved deeper into the station, Eleanor surveyed the building improvements with a critical eye. "You've been busy. Got that main bay looking almost functional." "Zoe deserves most of the credit for the documentation and research. She has better instincts for connecting historical details than I do." "Speaking of Zoe, where is she today?" "Working with Tyler Franklin on our website. He's home from college for the summer and has been invaluable getting our digital presence established. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Tyler Franklin, computer science major at State University, that's him. Zoe found him through some online local heritage forum. He's building our virtual tour and crowdsourcing platform for community memories about the station. Tyler's a good kid, Eleanor acknowledged. His grandparents were founding members of the Historical Society. If he's helping you, that says something positive about your project. The endorsement felt significant. Morgan was learning that in communities like Pinewood Valley, family connections and generational relationships carried weight that couldn't be purchased or manufactured. I heard you hired the Rodriguez girl for part-time work too, Eleanor continued as they navigated toward the former chief's office. Lucia's been fantastic, handles visitor inquiries, manages our volunteer schedule, and has great instincts for community outreach. Plus, she actually wants to learn about architectural conservation, which is rare. The Rodriguez family goes back 5 generations in this valley, Eleanor agreed. Been struggling since the sawmill downsized. Lucia's college fund could probably use the help. Morgan was beginning to understand how Pinewood Valley operated. Every business decision had personal implications for families who had lived here for decades. Success or failure affected not just her own family, but a network of relationships built over generations. Eleanor, can I ask you something? Sure. When I bought this place, the city council seemed almost desperate to sell quickly. They accepted my first offer without negotiation, which seemed unusual for a historic public building, even one needing renovation. Eleanor's expression became guarded. The town went through some difficult times after the budget crisis. Between deferred maintenance and declining tax revenue, they inherited more problems than solutions. Selling quickly was probably their only option to avoid further liability. The explanation made sense, but something in Eleanor's tone suggested there might be more to the story. Before Morgan could pursue the question further, Zoe appeared in the doorway connecting the chief's office to the dispatch area. Mom, the website is live and our virtual tour platform is working. Tyler wants to show you the community memory portal. I'll be right there, sweetheart. Eleanor watched the interaction with evident approval. That daughter of yours is going to be a real asset to this community. Not many teenagers show that level of commitment to preserving local history. She's been my partner through everything, Morgan said with obvious pride. I couldn't have done any of this without her. Well, you better get those digital systems figured out. Word is spreading about your approach to community involvement. Martha from the Quilting Guild mentioned you spent 2 hours discussing how they might use the space for their heritage craft demonstrations. The comment surprised Morgan. That's just good community engagement. People deserve to feel ownership of spaces with significant public history. Maybe where you come from, Eleanor replied with a slight smile. Around here, developers have traditionally been more interested in quick profits than community benefits. As Eleanor prepared to leave, she hesitated as if debating whether to share something important. Morgan, there's something you should know. Valley Vista Development has been making inquiries about properties in the downtown district. They've approached several business owners about selling, usually with offers significantly above market value. Valley Vista Development? They're behind that luxury resort project on the North Ridge. Word is they're interested in transforming this entire historic district into an upscale shopping and dining destination. The kind of development that would eliminate authentic local businesses like ours. A chill ran through Morgan that had nothing to do with the mountain breeze. She had invested everything she had financially and emotionally into building a life in this community. The thought of being forced out by development pressure was terrifying. Have they approached you? Not yet, but they've made offers to Richard and James. Neither was interested, but the company's representatives made it clear they expect the zoning to change eventually. They suggested that early cooperation would be more profitable than waiting for inevitability. The veiled threat was unmistakable. Morgan had encountered similar corporate tactics during her time in commercial development, pressure disguised as opportunity, with implied consequences for resistance. What do you think their chances are of changing the zoning? Eleanor shrugged, but her expression was troubled. Depends on how much political influence they can buy and whether the community stands together. Development money can be very persuasive to town councils facing budget shortfalls. After Eleanor left, Morgan stood alone in the former chief's office, surrounded by the half-completed restoration that represented her family's future, and felt the weight of challenges she hadn't anticipated. Creating a community heritage center was difficult enough without external pressure threatening the very foundation of her investment. But as she looked around at the improvements they'd made, the relationships they'd begun building, and the evidence of Zoe's growing confidence and skills, she felt her determination strengthened rather than weakened. She had come too far to be intimidated by corporate pressure. Whatever Valley Vista Development had planned, they would discover that Morgan Chun was not someone who backed down from a fight, especially when her daughter's future was at stake. What she didn't yet know was that the greatest challenge to her heritage center wasn't corporate development pressure or community skepticism. It was hidden directly behind the chief's office wall, and it would soon transform her modest preservation. Project into the center of a national security investigation that would test every ounce of courage and determination she possessed. The grand opening of Station 37 Heritage Center exceeded Morgan's most optimistic projections. The combination of free guided tours and Zoe's targeted social media campaign had attracted a steady stream of curious locals, many openly skeptical but unable to resist exploring the transformed space. The thoughtfully designed exhibits showcasing firefighter equipment through the decades generated enthusiastic conversations, while their specialized focus on Cold War-era emergency preparedness drew interest from history buffs willing to drive significant distances. By closing time, they had booked 4 community events for the following month and received several partnership inquiries from local organizations. It wasn't financial security, but it represented genuine progress toward sustainability. Not bad for day one, Richard acknowledged when he stopped by late in the afternoon, though his tone carried the reservation of someone who had seen many promising starts fail to maintain momentum. The real test comes when the novelty wears. Often winter slows tourism. I know, Morgan agreed. But at least people are willing to give us a chance. As encouraging as the public response had been, it was what happened after closing time that would change everything for Morgan and Zoe. Chun. Morgan was in the chief's office arranging period-appropriate furnishings when she noticed something peculiar about the oak paneling behind the desk. Near the built-in bookcase, a section roughly 3 feet wide showed subtle variation in wood grain that was only visible when the afternoon light struck it at a specific angle. "That's odd," she murmured, kneeling to examine the area more closely. Running her hand across the surface, she could feel a barely perceptible seam around the section. One corner featured a small depression that might once have served as a finger. "Pull. What are you looking at, Mom?" Zoe asked, appearing in the doorway with her laptop. "I thought we were ordering pizza to celebrate. Look at this wall section. Does it seem different to you?" Zoe crouched beside her mother, studying the paneling with the fresh perspective of someone trained to notice architectural inconsistencies. "It's like a concealed cabinet or something. You think there's storage space behind it?" "The original plans never mentioned anything like this," Morgan mused. Neither did the building inspector. They examined the edges more carefully, finding what appeared to be deliberate cuts in the paneling that had been carefully disguised through skilled craftsmanship. Years of accumulated wax and possibly intentional concealment had effectively hidden the access point from casual observation. Only one way to find out, Morgan decided, retrieving a precision pry bar from her restoration toolkit. It took nearly 30 minutes of careful work to break the seal around the edges. Years of accumulated shellac and what appeared to be deliberate weatherproofing had fused the panel to its frame. When they finally created sufficient leverage to pull the section forward, it revealed a metal door secured with a combination lock. That looked decades old. "Okay, this is officially strange," Zoe declared, documenting their discovery with her phone's camera. Who installs a locked vault in a fire chief's office? The combination lock presented an obvious obstacle, but Morgan remembered the manila envelope the city manager had given her containing station records and maintenance information. Among the mundane operational documents was a small notebook, filled with the former chief's handwritten notes about equipment maintenance and station protocols. On the inside back cover, written in faded blue ink, was a series of numbers with no accompanying explanation. 41-17-23. "Worth trying," Morgan said, turning the dial carefully. To her amazement, the lock clicked open on the first attempt. "Number." "Way," Zoe whispered. "That's either incredibly lucky or really suspicious." Morgan hesitated, suddenly aware they might be crossing a line into something they didn't understand. "Maybe we should contact someone before going further." "Like who?" Zoe asked practically. "The police?" "Hello, officer. We found a secret vault in our legally purchased building and thought you should know. They'll think we're making it up." After another moment's deliberation, Morgan's curiosity prevailed. She pulled the metal door open, revealing a small chamber built into the wall. Her flashlight beam illuminated what appeared to be a concrete-lined compartment approximately 3 feet deep. "I'm going to check it out," she announced. "You stay here in case in case anything happens." "Absolutely not," Zoe protested. "This is exactly how people disappear in mystery novels. Either we both look or neither of us looks." Recognizing the stubborn determination Zoe had inherited honestly, Morgan nodded. "Fine, but I go first. And if anything seems dangerous, we're out of there immediately." The vault proved surprisingly clean and dry, and as Morgan's flashlight swept the space, both women gasped at what they discovered. It wasn't a simple storage safe or document repository. It was a fully equipped emergency communication station, with military-style filing cabinets. A desk bearing what appeared to be vintage radio equipment occupied one corner, while detailed maps covered another wall marked with concentric circles and annotations in what looked like military code. "Mom," Zoe whispered, her voice tight with uncertainty. "What is this place?" Morgan shook her head, equally baffled. "I have absolutely no idea." They moved cautiously through the small chamber, careful not to disturb anything while trying to understand what they'd discovered. The filing cabinets were locked, but a set of keys hung on a hook near the desk. Opening the first cabinet revealed folders labeled with alphanumeric codes that meant nothing to either of them. But the contents were deeply unsettling technical. Diagrams, photographs of what appeared to be military installations, and documents stamped classified filled the carefully organized files. These weren't ordinary municipal records or personal storage. They looked like national security materials. "These look like Cold War emergency plans," Morgan said slowly, the implication sending chills through her. "Evacuation routes, fallout patterns, emergency broadcast protocols." Zoe had moved to the radio equipment and experimentally pressed the power switch. To their surprise, the system hummed to life, bathing the chamber in an eerie green glow. From vintage vacuum tubes, the display showed frequency bands marked with military designations. "Don't touch anything else," Morgan warned, suddenly acutely aware they were in far over their heads. "We need to secure this place and figure out what to do next." "Do what?" Zoe asked, but this time her tone carried genuine concern rather than teenage defiance. "It was an excellent question. Who did you contact when you discovered what appeared?" To be a Cold War-era emergency command post hidden behind the wall of your newly purchased fire station? The answer came unexpectedly the following morning, before Morgan had decided how to handle their extraordinary discovery. She had secured the vault, slept poorly, and was considering her options when a dark sedan with government plates pulled into her parking lot. Two individuals in conservative suits emerged, their professional bearing and alert posture immediately distinguishing them from typical Heritage Center visitors. Morgan's heart hammered as they approached the entrance, wondering how they could possibly know about her discovery so quickly. "Ms. Chun," the older of the two called as they entered. "I'm Agent Samantha Reynolds, Department of Homeland Security. This is Agent Michaels. We need to speak with you privately about this property." Morgan's mind raced. How could government agents know what she'd found less than 12 hours after the discovery? Had the vault been monitored somehow? Was the former fire chief involved? With intelligence operations? What had she gotten herself and Zoe into? "What's this about?" she asked, trying to project calm while her thoughts churned. "It would be better to discuss this inside," Reynolds replied, her tone polite but carrying an authority that discouraged argument. In her small office with Zoe nervously taking notes on her tablet, Reynolds addressed the situation directly. "Miss Chun, we have reason to believe you've discovered a classified facility within this building. We need you to tell us exactly what you found and what actions you've taken since the discovery." The directness of her question confirmed Morgan's suspicions, while paradoxically providing some relief. At least they were acknowledging the reality of the situation rather than making her feel paranoid. "My daughter and I found a hidden vault last night," she admitted. "It contains what appears to be emergency communication equipment and classified documents. We didn't remove anything, and we secured the access point before leaving." Reynolds and Michaels exchanged meaningful glances before Reynolds continued. "Ms. Chen, what you've discovered is a decommissioned Federal Emergency Management Command Post, designated Mountain Echo 7. It was officially discontinued in 1992, but maintained as a contingency site for regional emergency response. The fire chief was involved with intelligence operations?" Morgan asked incredulously. "Not directly," Michael spoke for the first time. "Chief Harmon was what we call a facility custodian. He maintained property that concealed a classified emergency management installation and was compensated for his discretion without knowing operational details. The arrangement should have been terminated when the station was decommissioned, but proper protocols weren't followed." Reynolds picked up the explanation. "What you found contains sensitive information that remains classified. We'll need to secure the facility and remove any materials that could compromise national security. The question is how to accomplish this without disrupting your business operations." The agent's explanation raised as many questions as it answered, but Morgan felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief that she wasn't dealing with active criminal activity, but apprehension about what government involvement might mean for her family's future. "How long will this take?" she asked. "I just opened my Heritage Center yesterday. Normally, we'd need to secure the entire site for several weeks while a specialized team cataloged and removed classified materials," Reynolds explained. "But we understand this creates a significant hardship for your operation. We're authorized to work with you on a solution that protects both security interests and your livelihood." After extensive discussion and the signing of multiple confidentiality agreements, they reached a compromise. The government team would establish a secure perimeter around the chief's office, creating a separate entrance through the building's rear wall. Morgan would reconfigure her exhibition space to function without accessing that area. And most importantly, neither she nor Zoe would discuss their discovery with anyone. "Just out of curiosity," Reynolds said as they prepared to coordinate the logistics, "how did you manage to purchase this property for such a low price when it clearly has strategic significance?" Morgan shrugged. The city council seemed desperate for a quick sale, I assumed it was because of maintenance liabilities. Interesting, Reynolds mused, making notes in a secure tablet. Because our records indicate that the federal government was providing annual maintenance compensation until the station was officially decommissioned last year. Someone was receiving funds to maintain this facility's security, and the property was sold for next to nothing. Zoe looked up from her own tablet. That doesn't make sense, she said with the logical clarity that only teenagers possess. If someone was being paid to keep it secure, wouldn't they have made sure it stayed secure when the station was sold? Reynolds' expression hardened slightly. Exactly. Either the payments were being diverted, or someone deliberately arranged for this property to change hands without proper security clearance. Michaels leaned forward. Ms. Chun, we'll need to investigate the financial trail surrounding this sale. In the meantime, maintain absolute discretion about what you've discovered. What appears to be a Cold War relic may have more contemporary significance than we initially realized. As the agents departed to arrange their security team, Morgan sat in her office, feeling overwhelmed by the rapid escalation of her situation. Yesterday, she had been a single mother trying to build a sustainable heritage center in a skeptical community. Today, she was involved in a classified government operation with implications she couldn't begin to understand. Mom, Zoe said quietly, are we in trouble? Morgan looked at her daughter's concerned face and felt a surge of protective determination. No, sweetheart. We found something we weren't supposed to find, but we're handling it responsibly. The government agents seem reasonable, and they're working with us to protect the Heritage Center. But what if this ruins everything we've built here? It was a fair question. Morgan had invested not just money, but hope into their fresh start in Pinewood Valley. The relationships they'd begun building, the community acceptance they'd started, earning the future they'd envisioned, all of it could be jeopardized by circumstances completely beyond their control. Then we'll figure out another way forward, she said with more confidence than she felt. We've overcome bigger challenges than this. Zoe nodded, but Morgan could see the worry in her eyes. They had both sacrificed too much to reach this point, to accept defeat easily. The next few days would test that resolve in ways neither of them could imagine, as the simple discovery of a hidden vault began to unravel a conspiracy that reached far beyond their small mountain town, threatening not just their business but potentially their lives. The specialized government team arrived before dawn 3 days later, their unmarked vans and professional efficiency creating a controlled chaos that somehow avoided attracting unwanted attention. Agent Reynolds had kept her promise about minimizing disruption to Morgan's Heritage Center, but the reality of accommodating a classified material extraction while running a public exhibition space proved more challenging than either side had anticipated. We'll establish a secure perimeter on the chief's office, explained Dr. Evan Park, the team's technical specialist, as he reviewed the operational plan with Morgan. The new entrance will be completely separate from your visitor areas, and we'll install temporary walls to ensure complete separation between public and restricted zones. Morgan nodded, though she felt increasingly uncertain about balancing the needs of a covert government operation with the demands of maintaining an engaging public space. How will I explain the restricted area to volunteers and visitors? Historical conservation work, Reynolds suggested. Tell them you're restoring fragile archival materials that require controlled environmental conditions. It's plausible and discourages curiosity. As the team began their careful work, Morgan attempted to maintain normal operations in the reduced space. The reconfigured exhibition layout was cramped but functional, and Zoe had updated their digital tour to reflect the special conservation project taking place in the chief's office. Their second week of operation proceeded with surprising smoothness, considering the extraordinary circumstances unfolding behind the temporary walls. The morning brought an unexpected surge in visitors. Word was spreading through Pinewood Valley about Station 37's thoughtfully curated exhibits and engaging presentation of local emergency service history. Morgan was conducting a tour for a group of retired teachers when she noticed a silver luxury SUV making its third slow pass in front of the station. Following Reynolds' instructions about reporting unusual interest, she discreetly photographed the vehicle's license plate while continuing her presentation about firefighting equipment evolution. When the same vehicle parked across the street, 30 minutes later, and a well-dressed man emerged with a professional camera, she sent the information to Reynolds' secure communication number. Agent Michaels appeared within minutes, ostensibly delivering historical documents, but positioning himself to observe the photographer. After a brief phone conversation, he approached Morgan at the welcome desk. "Valley Vista Development," he murmured, keeping his voice low. "Jackson Myers, their acquisition director. He's been purchasing historic properties throughout the region for luxury renovation projects." "The development company Eleanor warned me about," Morgan confirmed. "They want to transform the historic district into upscale retail." "Interesting timing for such focused interest in your specific property," Michaels noted. "Could be coincidence, but in our line of work, we don't believe in coincidences." Morgan considered the implications. "You think there's a connection between the development company and whatever's happening with the emergency command post?" "We're investigating all possibilities," Michaels replied diplomatically. "In the meantime, if Myers approaches you directly, engage normally, but share the details with us immediately." The conversation proved prophetic. That afternoon, as Morgan was completing a conservation assessment for a donated firefighter's helmet, Jackson Myers himself entered the Heritage Center. His tailored suit and manicured appearance seemed distinctly out of place among the utilitarian exhibits and historic equipment. "Ms. Chun," he called, his practiced smile revealing perfect teeth. "Jackson Myers, Valley Vista Development. I was hoping to discuss a potential opportunity with you." Morgan wiped her hands on a conservator's cloth, taking a moment to compose herself before responding. "What kind of opportunity, Mr. Myers?" "A potentially very lucrative one," he replied, glancing around the Heritage Center with barely concealed assessment of its market potential. Valley Vista is developing a comprehensive cultural district concept for downtown Pinewood boutique galleries, farm-to-table restaurants, artisanal retail, luxury vacation rentals. We're transforming this underutilized historic zone into a destination experience. "And you want my location," Morgan concluded. Myers' smile widened. "Your property occupies a strategic position in our master plan. We're prepared to make a very generous offer well above market value, enough for you to relocate to a more suitable location, or perhaps pursue other opportunities entirely." The temptation was real financial security, an end to the struggle of building a heritage center from nothing, resources to provide for Zoe's education without constant worry. But something in Myers' overly smooth manner and the timing of his interest triggered her suspicions. "I'm not interested in selling, Mr. Myers," she replied firmly. "I've just opened my center and made significant investments in this location." His smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "I understand your attachment to your venture, Ms. Chun. New projects require emotional investment, but being practical, this location presents significant challenges for public exhibition, limited parking, outdated infrastructure, accessibility, compliance issues, restricted expansion potential." He gestured toward the temporarily sealed area. "I understand you're already facing costly conservation requirements. Our offer would eliminate those concerns entirely while providing substantial profit on your initial investment." The specific mention of the restricted area sent alarm signals through Morgan's mind. How did he know about the conservation project explanation so quickly? Had he been monitoring the property more closely than casual observation would suggest? "My center is performing well, and I'm addressing building issues systematically," she replied carefully. "This property isn't for sale." Meyer's expression cooled further. Miss Chen, development is inevitable in this district. The Planning Commission is already reviewing zoning amendments that would significantly impact heritage operations in this area. Early participants in our vision receive premium compensation. Those who delay often find themselves at a disadvantage. The veiled threat was unmistakable, delivered with corporate politeness but carrying clear implications. Morgan had encountered similar tactics during her corporate career, pressure disguised as opportunity, with suggested consequences for resistance. "I'll take my chances with the Planning Commission," she replied. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have visitors waiting for their tour." After Myers departed, Morgan immediately contacted Reynolds, relaying the conversation in detail. Her response revealed new layers of concern about their situation. "We'll investigate potential connections between Valley Vista and our security issues," she said. "In the meantime, be extremely careful. Development companies typically employ legal and political pressure, not physical threats. But given the unusual circumstances surrounding your property acquisition, caution is warranted." "You think I might be in actual danger?" Morgan asked bluntly. "I think vigilance is warranted until we understand all the players involved," Reynolds replied. "We're accelerating our timeline for clearing the command post. The team will work extended hours to complete extraction as quickly as possible." That evening, Morgan and Zoe were invited to dinner at Richard and Diane Donnelly's home, a welcome distraction from the day's tensions. The Donnelly house was lovingly restored, Victorian, filled with family photographs and mementos from decades in the hardware business. "Hope you like trout," Richard said as he served generous portions of freshly caught mountain fish over wild rice. "My father's recipe, been feeding the family since anyone can remember." The conversation flowed easily, with Richard sharing stories from his early days in the family business. Diane revealed her background in accounting before joining Donnelly's hardware, and Zoe and the Donnellys' college-age son, Michael, discovered shared interests in digital archiving and historic preservation technology. "You know," Diane said as they enjoyed coffee after dinner, "when you first showed up at that preservation meeting, I gave you about 8 weeks. Most newcomers with big plans don't understand how challenging restoration really is." "What changed?" "Your mind?" Morgan asked. "The way you've handled the obstacles you've faced," Richard replied. "Starting a heritage center with limited funding, dealing with an older building's problems, facing pressure from developers, you haven't looked for easy answers or quick fixes. That takes character." "You've been approached by Valley Vista too?" Morgan asked. "Yesterday," Diane confirmed. "Offered us triple the assessed value for our building." When Richard declined, Myers mentioned potential changes to historic district regulations that could make family-owned businesses economically unviable in the downtown area. Richard's expression darkened. 3 generations of Donnellys have operated from that location. We're not selling out to build pretentious galleries for people who never contribute to this community." The solidarity warmed Morgan unexpectedly. She wasn't alone in resisting the development pressure. But the conversation also revealed how strategically Valley Vista was approaching the district's business owners, using both financial incentives and regulatory threats to achieve their goals. "What if we organize the district businesses?" Morgan suggested. "Present a united front against the rezoning proposal." "Might work," Richard agreed. "Several owners are wavering, but if enough of us stand firm, community pressure could influence the Planning Commission. Elections are coming up next year. Michael could help coordinate a social media campaign." Diane nodded thoughtfully. "Highlighting the cultural importance of the historic district. Show people what they'd lose if these places disappear." As they discussed strategy, Morgan felt a growing sense of connection to Pinewood Valley and its community. Despite the extraordinary secret behind her office wall and the pressure from development interests, She was finding her place among people who valued determination and integrity over quick profits. The sense of belonging made what happened next even more devastating. The following morning brought news that shattered Morgan's growing confidence about their future in Pinewood Valley. She arrived at the Heritage Center early to find Reynolds, waiting with an expression that immediately put her on alert. "We've got a serious problem," she said without preamble, guiding Morgan to the temporary security area where Dr. Park was coordinating the extraction team's work on a secure laptop. The command post wasn't just monitoring Cold War Soviet threats. It was tracking something much more concerning. On the laptop screen, Park displayed a series of maps showing the western mountain states with particular focus on Pinewood Valley and surrounding wilderness areas. This station was maintained off the books to monitor suspected domestic extremist activities using legitimate conservation and recreation areas as cover. The data suggests someone has been establishing unauthorized militia training facilities throughout these remote mountain regions, using public lands for paramilitary operations. Morgan stared at the technical displays, trying to comprehend the implications. Militia activity here in Pinewood Valley? Not exactly domestic terrorism, Reynolds clarified, but organized paramilitary groups operating beyond legal authorities. The monitoring equipment was tracking irregular communications, patterns, and supply movements that didn't match declared recreational or conservation activities. Dr. Park pointed to highlighted entries in the communication logs. The system flagged an organization called Sentinel Mountain Resources. On paper, there are sustainable forestry operations specializing in selective harvesting. In reality, they appear repeatedly in intelligence reports about extremist networks moving personnel and equipment through seemingly legitimate channels. And they're connected to Valley Vista development? Morgan asked, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to align. Sentinel Mountain is owned by Westward Heritage Group, Reynolds continued, which is a primary investor in Valley Vista development. We believe Valley Vista's interest in the historic district isn't just about luxury development. It's about controlling access to municipal infrastructure and eliminating potential witnesses to their regional operations. The revelation hit Morgan like a physical blow. The pressure to sell her property wasn't simply corporate greed or development opportunism. It was part of a concerning operation involving potential domestic extremists that put her family directly in harm's way. That's why they're pushing so hard for rezoning, she realized. Historic businesses with community connections are harder to control than transient tourist developments with seasonal staff. Exactly, Dr. Park confirmed. And your Heritage Center is particularly problematic because it literally houses a monitoring station designed to detect exactly what they're doing. When I refused to sell, I became a potential obstacle, Morgan finished. One they might decide to remove by means beyond legal pressure. Reynolds' expression was grim. We're coordinating with the FBI to move against Sentinel Mountain and their network, but that will take time. In the interim, we strongly recommend protective custody for you and Zoe until we can secure the evidence needed for prosecution. The suggestion felt like a death sentence for everything Morgan had worked to build. Protective custody meant abandoning the Heritage Center, disappearing from the community just as she was beginning to find acceptance and belonging. It meant disrupting Zoe's life again, running from danger instead of confronting it. How long? She asked, her voice tight with emotion. Impossible to predict, Reynolds admitted. Weeks, possibly months, if this becomes a formal witness protection situation. No, the word escaped before Morgan had fully processed her decision. There has to be another way. Reynolds' expression hardened. Miss Chun, I don't think you fully appreciate the seriousness of this situation. These people coordinate paramilitary training operations and have political connections at multiple levels of government. They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens their operations. I understand the danger, Morgan insisted, her mind racing through alternatives. but running away solves nothing. It lets them win, not just against me, but against this entire community. What happens to Richard and Diane's business, to Eleanor's real estate office, to everyone else standing against the development? That's not our primary concern, Dr. Park interjected. Our priority is securing the classified materials and ensuring civilian safety. Morgan paced the small security area, frustration building. Throughout her life, she had faced seemingly insurmountable obstacles, raising Zoe alone, surviving. Corporate downsizing, starting over with nothing but determination. Each time, the easy path would have been retreat, acceptance of limitation, settling for less than she knew was possible. What if we use this situation instead of running from it? She suggested, an idea forming. You need evidence against a Sentinel Mountain and their extremist connections. What if I helped you get it? Reynolds looked skeptical. What exactly are you proposing? Myers wants this property desperately. Let's use that. I'll contact him, say I've reconsidered his offer, but I want to meet with the principal investors to discuss terms. If he's connected to the extremist network, a face-to-face meeting could provide the evidence you need. Absolutely not, Reynolds said flatly. We don't use civilians as operational assets. You wouldn't be using me, Morgan argued. I'd be volunteering, and I wouldn't be alone. You and your team would monitor everything. A direct meeting might reveal connections we haven't documented yet. Dr. Park looked up from his laptop. It could accelerate our timeline significantly. A recorded conversation with the principals could establish conspiracy charges without waiting for the field evidence to be fully analyzed. It's too dangerous, Reynolds maintained. These aren't ordinary land developers playing financial games. They're coordinating paramilitary operations with potential domestic security implications. Morgan thought about Zoe's future, about the community that was finally accepting them, about the principle of standing up for what was right, even when it was frightening. Life is dangerous, she countered. I didn't come this far to hide in a safe house while everything I've built gets destroyed. I'm offering you a way to stop these people while protecting my family's future. The debate continued for over an hour, with agents weighing operational security against the potential intelligence value of Morgan's proposal. Eventually, a compromise emerged that satisfied neither her desire for immediate action nor their preference for complete risk elimination. Morgan would contact Myers while expressing renewed interest in selling, but any meeting would be strictly controlled. The encounter would take place in a public location with comprehensive surveillance and immediate intervention capability. Zoe would remain under protective supervision regardless of the operation's outcome. As the agents finalized their security protocols, Morgan called Zoe to the office to explain the situation. Her daughter's reaction surprised her. You're going to meet with the extremist guys to help catch them? Zoe asked, her expression hovering between concern and admiration. I'm going to do what I can to protect our future here, Morgan replied. Carefully. The government agents will be monitoring everything. It's not as dangerous as it sounds. Zoe studied her mother's face with the perceptive intensity that always made her seem older than her years. Dad always said you were the most determined person he knew. I didn't understand what he meant until we moved here and started the Heritage Center. The reference to Zoe's father, who had abandoned them when the responsibilities of family life became overwhelming, struck Morgan deeply. She had never thought of her perseverance as extraordinary. It had simply been necessity, the only way forward when retreat meant abandoning her daughter's future. I'm not special, sweetheart. I'm just stubborn enough to keep going when things get difficult. That's what courage is, Mom, Zoe said with quiet conviction. Doing what needs to be done, even when you're scared. That evening, as Morgan prepared for what could be the most dangerous encounter of her life, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A simple $800 investment in an abandoned fire station had led to discovering a cold, War Emergency Command Post, uncovering a domestic extremist network and finding a community worth fighting to protect. Tomorrow would determine whether her courage was sufficient to see them through to safety and success, or whether the forces arrayed against them were too powerful to overcome. But as she looked around the Heritage Center, they had transformed. Through determination and hard work, she felt certain of one thing: whatever happened, she would face it without backing down. The stakes had escalated far beyond business survival or community acceptance. Now they involved national security, extremist networks, and the safety of countless innocent people. But the core principle remained unchanged: individual courage could create positive change even against seemingly impossible odds. Morgan Chun had come to Pinewood Valley seeking only a fresh start for herself and her daughter. What she had found instead was a community worth defending, a cause worthy of risk, and the opportunity to prove that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they refused to surrender to fear. The meeting with Myers and his associates was scheduled for the following evening. By then, Morgan would discover whether her determination was strong enough to help bring down a domestic extremist network, or whether she had finally encountered a challenge too dangerous to overcome. But as she secured the Heritage Center for the night, checking the locks and setting the alarm system that now protected both historical exhibits and classified government operations, she felt the same quiet confidence that had carried her through every previous crisis. She had come too far to fail now. The next morning brought an unexpected complication that nearly derailed their carefully planned operation. Eleanor Winters arrived at the Heritage Center earlier than usual, her expression troubled and her manner uncharacteristically hesitant. "Morgan, we need to talk," she said, glancing around nervously. "There's something I should have told you weeks ago, and I'm afraid it might put you in danger." Reynolds, who had been coordinating security preparations in the restricted area, emerged at the sound of Eleanor's voice. Her professional instincts immediately recognized the signs of someone carrying sensitive information. "Ms. Winters," she said, showing her credentials. "Agent Reynolds, Department of Homeland Security. What information are you referring to?" Eleanor's eyes widened as she processed the presence of federal agents in Morgan's Heritage Center. "I knew it. I knew there was more to that hidden room than archival conservation." Morgan exchanged glances with Reynolds before making a decision that violated their security protocols, but aligned with her principles about community trust. "Eleanor, what we're about to tell you is classified, but you're already involved whether we acknowledge it or not. The room behind my office was a Cold War emergency command post. We've discovered evidence of domestic extremist activity in the surrounding wilderness, and Valley Vista development appears to be connected to the network." Rather than appearing shocked, Eleanor nodded grimly. "That explains what my brother discovered at the Forest Service. He's been tracking irregular access patterns in the restricted wilderness, areas vehicles entering conservation zones without proper permits, unusual supply deliveries to remote fire observation towers. When he started asking questions about Sentinel Mountain resources, he was approached by two men who told him administrative curiosity could be dangerous for government employees." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "He came to me because he was concerned, but he'd already documented patterns that prove someone's been moving personnel and equipment through conservation lands using forestry permits as cover." Reynolds accepted the folder, scanning its contents with growing interest. "This corroborates our intelligence about the extremist network. Your brother may have evidence that could help prosecute the entire conspiracy." "There's more," Eleanor continued. "Yesterday, Jackson Mears approached my brother directly, offered him a position with Valley Vista's Conservation Consulting Division, essentially bribing him to stop investigating access anomalies. When my brother declined, Myers suggested that accidents happen frequently in remote wilderness areas. The direct threat against Eleanor's family member elevated the situation. beyond corporate pressure into criminal intimidation. Morgan felt a surge of anger that these people were targeting the community she had come to care about. "We'll need to provide protection for your brother," Reynolds said. "And this information actually strengthens our operational plan. If they're threatening Forest Service employees, it suggests they're moving toward more aggressive tactics to secure their position." Morgan made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "Eleanor, I want you to come to the meeting tonight." "What meeting?" Eleanor asked. "I'm meeting with Myers and his investors, ostensibly to discuss selling my property. The government agents will be monitoring everything to gather evidence about the extremist conspiracy. But if you're there as my business advisor, it might encourage them to reveal more about their operations." Reynolds shook her head immediately. "Absolutely not. We agreed to one civilian participant under controlled conditions. Adding another person exponentially increases the risk. But it also increases the potential intelligence value," Morgan argued. "Eleanor knows the local property landscape, the wilderness areas, the political dynamics. Her presence might prompt them to discuss aspects of their plan they wouldn't reveal to an outsider." Dr. Park, who had been listening from the doorway, offered a different perspective. "Actually, it could work in our favor. If they perceive Ms. Chun as having local support for selling, they might be more forthcoming about their long-term development plans and operational requirements." The debate continued for nearly an hour, with security concerns balanced against operational advantages. Eventually, they reached a modified agreement. Eleanor could attend the meeting as Morgan's real estate consultant, but both women would wear concealed recording devices and remain in constant contact with the surveillance team. As the afternoon progressed, final preparations for the evening's operation created an atmosphere of controlled tension throughout the Heritage Center. Zoe had been moved to a secure location with Agent Michaels, despite her protests about missing. The epic conclusion to their spy adventure. Morgan spent the hours between visitor tours reviewing her cover story and practicing natural responses to various scenarios the agents anticipated. Remember, Reynolds briefed her one final time. "Your goal is to appear genuinely interested in selling while encouraging them to reveal details about their broader operation. Don't push for information they wouldn't naturally share, and never put yourself at risk for intelligence value." "What if they become suspicious?" Morgan asked. "The moment we detect any threat, we intervene immediately," Dr. Park assured her. "You'll have multiple agents within 50 feet at all times, and your recording devices include emergency activation signals." As closing time approached, Morgan changed into business attire that felt foreign after weeks in restoration. Clothes. The concealed recording equipment was virtually undetectable, but she remained acutely aware of its presence and the extraordinary situation it represented. Eleanor arrived precisely at 6 p.m., dressed professionally but carrying the same determined expression that had helped her family's real estate business survive decades of economic challenges. "Ready for this?" she asked Morgan. "As ready as anyone can be for meeting domestic extremists disguised as real estate developers," Morgan replied with dark humor. "When you put it like that, it sounds completely insane," Eleanor observed. "Which probably means it's exactly what we need to do." Together, they walked toward what could be either the most important meeting of their lives or the beginning of a nightmare from which they might not emerge safely. But as they approached the restaurant where Myers waited with his mysterious associates, both women carried the quiet confidence of people who had decided that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. The historic district that had become their home, the community that had finally accepted them, and the principle that ordinary people could stand against powerful forces when they refused to be intimidated. These values were worth defending, even against an extremist network that had already demonstrated its willingness to use threats and intimidation. In a few hours, they would discover whether their courage was sufficient to help bring down a dangerous organization that threatened not just their community, but potentially national security. The stakes could not be higher, but neither could their determination to see justice done and their community protected. The meeting that would determine everything was about to begin. Pine Ridge Lodge perched on Pinewood Valley's scenic riverfront, its windows offering panoramic views of the rushing water and distant mountain peaks. Under normal circumstances, it would have been an idyllic setting for a business dinner. Tonight, it served as the stage for what could either expose a domestic extremist conspiracy or end in disaster for two women who had refused to be intimidated. Morgan and Eleanor arrived precisely at 7 p.m., their professional attire and confident bearing masking the sophisticated recording equipment hidden beneath their clothing. Agent Reynolds' surveillance team had been in position for over an hour, strategically placed throughout the restaurant and surrounding area with clear lines of sight to every exit. Jackson Myers waited at a corner table overlooking the river. But he wasn't alone. Two men in expensive outdoor clothing flanked him, their alert postures and calculating eyes suggesting backgrounds far removed from legitimate real estate development. As Morgan and Eleanor approached, she felt the weight of the concealed recording device and the knowledge that everything said in the next hour could determine the fate of her community and potentially save countless lives. "Miss Chun," Myers greeted them with his practiced smile, though something in his expression suggested heightened tension. "So pleased you've reconsidered our offer. And Miss Winters, what a pleasant surprise. I wasn't aware you were advising Ms. Chun on real estate matters. Eleanor's been invaluable in helping me understand the local property landscape," Morgan replied smoothly, settling into her chair while Eleanor took the seat beside her. "When making a decision of this magnitude, it's important to have guidance from someone with deep community roots." Myers nodded approvingly before gesturing to his companions. "Allow me to introduce Gabriel Harrington and Conrad Weiss, key investors in our Heritage Development Initiative. They're here to discuss the broader vision for Pinewood Valley's transformation." Morgan shook their hands, noting the calluses and weathered skin that suggested extensive outdoor experience rather than boardroom backgrounds. Harrington appeared to be in his early 50s with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. Weiss was younger, perhaps 40, with intense eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of their surroundings. "Thank you for meeting with us," Morgan said, projecting the enthusiasm of someone genuinely excited about a potential windfall. "I have to admit, when Eleanor and I discussed your offer, the financial possibilities were quite compelling." "Smart woman," Harrington said, his voice carrying a slight Western drawl. "Too many people in this area cling to outdated preservation models instead of embracing inevitable progress. The transformation we're planning will benefit everyone, those wise enough to participate early, of course." Eleanor leaned forward with apparent interest. "I've been curious about the scope of your development plans. The historic district has been protected for decades. What specific changes are you envisioning?" Weiss answered before Myers could respond. "Complete revitalization of the downtown core into a heritage tourism destination. Boutique retail, premium accommodations, authentic wilderness experiences with modern amenities, a controlled environment where visitors can experience mountain tradition without sacrificing luxury." "Controlled environment?" Morgan asked innocently, like she was simply interested in their business model. "Among other considerations," Harrington replied carefully. "Modern tourism requires security protocols and access management. Our investors have extensive experience in creating secure experiences in remote locations." The mention of security protocols sent a chill through Morgan, but she maintained her interested expression. "That sounds like it would create significant employment opportunities for local residents." "Selected employment opportunities," Weiss corrected, his tone suggesting that not all current residents would be welcome in their new vision. "Premium destinations require carefully vetted staffing to maintain appropriate standards. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. What about existing businesses? Family operations that have served this community for generations? Meyer's smile became more strained. Change always involves difficult transitions, Ms. Winters, but our compensation packages are designed to ease those adjustments. Early cooperation receives premium consideration. And late cooperation? Eleanor asked with seeming casualness. The temperature at the table dropped perceptibly. Harrington's expression hardened while Wace's hand moved slightly closer too. His jacket in a gesture that Agent Reynolds' team would certainly notice. Market forces and regulatory evolution eventually compel adaptation, Harrington said, his diplomatic language carrying unmistakable threats. Those who resist progress often find their positions becoming untenable. Morgan felt her recording device capturing every word while fighting to maintain her cover. I can understand the business pressures. That's actually part of why I'm reconsidering your offer. The Heritage Center is becoming increasingly complex to operate, especially with the building's historical restrictions. Exactly, Myers said, seizing on her apparent concern. Your property, for instance, faces significant compliance challenges, historical preservation requirements, accessibility upgrades, insurance liabilities. The costs are substantial for a small operation, plus the special considerations. Wace added, his eyes narrowing as he studied Morgan's reaction. Some properties in this district have unique characteristics that create additional complications. Morgan's heart rate accelerated, but she forced herself to appear puzzled rather than alarmed. Special considerations? I'm not sure I understand. Harrington leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more confidential tone. Ms. Chun, we're aware that your property has certain historical features that most buyers wouldn't appreciate. Features that could become problematic if they attracted unwanted attention from regulatory agencies. The direct reference to the command post confirmed that they knew far more about her property than any legitimate development company should. Morgan felt the weight of the recording equipment and the knowledge that they were gathering exactly the evidence Reynolds needed. I'm still not following, she said, maintaining her confused expression. Among other things, Weiss replied, studying her face intently. Old buildings in this district sometimes have infrastructure that served purposes beyond normal municipal operations, infrastructure that requires discreet management. Eleanor spoke up with apparent innocence. That sounds mysterious. What kind of infrastructure could create regulatory problems for new owners? The three men exchanged glances before Harrington made a decision that would prove to be their downfall. Ms. Winters, since you're advising Ms. Chun, perhaps it's appropriate to be more direct about the situation. He pulled out his phone and showed them what appeared to be architectural diagrams. Your friend's property contains a decommissioned government facility that was never properly cleared according to official protocols. The kind of facility that could create significant complications for certain parties if its existence became public knowledge. Morgan stared at the diagrams, her mind racing. They not only knew about the emergency command post but had detailed knowledge of its construction and purpose. This wasn't casual reconnaissance. It was inside information that suggested connections within the government itself. Government facility? She asked, her confusion now genuine. Like what kind of government facility? The kind that monitored activities in this region that some parties preferred to conduct without federal oversight, Weiss said bluntly. Activities that will continue once we've established proper control over the historic district and surrounding wilderness areas. The admission was more explicit than Morgan had dared hope for. They were essentially confessing to knowledge of both the monitoring station and their intention to use the area for unauthorized activities. What kind of activities require that level of secrecy? Eleanor asked, her tone suggesting business curiosity rather than suspicion. Harrington's smile returned, but it carried a predatory quality that made Morgan's skin crawl. Let's just say that modern constitutional militia movements sometimes require training, infrastructure that benefits from minimal regulatory interference, infrastructure that contributes significantly to the security readiness of like-minded citizens. Specialized training facilities, Myers added, apparently believing he was being helpful. Sentinel Mountain Resources has developed extensive expertise in establishing defensible positions throughout these mountain ranges, using conservation permits as cover. The mention of constitutional militia and Sentinel Mountain by name was exactly what Reynolds' team needed to establish the conspiracy charges. Morgan felt a surge of triumph beneath her fear, knowing they were gathering evidence that could destroy the entire extremist network. "That sounds like a sophisticated operation," she said admiringly. "How long have you been developing this expertise?" "Several years," Weiss replied with evident pride. "Our network extends throughout the western mountain states, but Pinewood Valley offers unique advantages remote enough to avoid excessive federal oversight, rugged enough for realistic training scenarios, close enough to strategic resources for efficient mobilization." "Mobilization for what?" Eleanor asked, her innocent curiosity pushing them toward even more damaging admissions. The three men exchanged another series of glances before Harrington apparently decided they had already revealed too much to maintain pretense. "Preparation for societal disruption scenarios that certain government agencies prefer to ignore," he said carefully. "A network of citizen patriots establishing security infrastructure independent of compromised federal resources." Morgan felt sick as the implications became clear. They were talking about anti-government extremist networks with the casual confidence of people discussing ordinary business transactions. "It sounds like you've built quite an operation," she said, fighting to keep admiration in her voice while horror filled her thoughts. "Operation is an appropriate term," Harrington agreed. "But operations require territorial security to function effectively. Which brings us back to your property, Ms. Chun. We need that location, and we're prepared to be very generous to ensure your cooperation." "How generous?" Morgan asked, playing her role to the end. Myers smiled broadly. $650,000 cash, completion within 72 hours of signed agreements. The offer was staggering, more than 800 times what she had paid for the property. But it also revealed the desperation behind their pressure campaign. "That's incredibly generous," Eleanor said, her tone suggesting she was seriously impressed. "But what guarantees can you provide about the historical preservation and any legal liabilities?" "There won't be any preservation issues to worry about," Weiss said dismissively. "Once we control the property, any inconvenient historical features will be handled through appropriate channels. Certain government contacts ensure that regulatory problems disappear." "Government contacts?" Morgan asked, her curiosity now genuine and alarmed. "Not everyone in federal service appreciates excessive democratic oversight of their operational autonomy," Harrington explained with a cold smile. "Former military and intelligence personnel often find private security arrangements quite profitable, especially when their expertise involves managing specialized facilities." The revelation that they had corrupted government officials to protect their operations added another layer to the conspiracy. Morgan realized they weren't just dealing with fringe extremists, but with a network that included compromised government insiders. "This all sounds very professional," she said, trying to project continued interest while internally recoiling from their casual extremism. "When would you need a final decision?" "Tonight," Weiss said bluntly, his expression hardening. "Our timeline has accelerated due to certain complications. We need control of that property immediately." The sudden time pressure confirmed Morgan's suspicions that her discovery of the facility had disrupted their plans. They were moving aggressively because they knew their operation was at risk. "Tonight seems rather rushed for such a major decision," Eleanor observed. "Ms. Winters," Harrington said, his voice carrying clear menace for the first time. "I don't think you fully understand the situation you've inserted yourself into. This isn't a negotiation between equals. This is an opportunity to profit from inevitable change or to become an obstacle that requires removal." The explicit threat against Eleanor triggered Morgan's protective instincts and her sense that they had gathered sufficient evidence. She needed to extract herself and Eleanor from the situation before it escalated to violence. "I appreciate the urgency," she said, reaching for her purse as if to retrieve documentation. "But even with such a generous offer, I'll need time to review the paperwork with my attorney." "There is no paperwork," Weiss said flatly. "There is acceptance of our offer and immediate transfer of property, or there are consequences. Choose quickly." As he spoke, both Harrington and Weiss shifted in their seats, positioning themselves to block any attempt at departure. Morgan realized they had moved beyond business pressure into active intimidation. "Consequences?" she asked, playing for time while hoping Reynolds' team was monitoring the escalating situation. "Accidents happen to people who interfere with important security operations," Myers said, his corporate facade finally cracking to reveal the extremist beneath. "Historic buildings can be so dangerous. Electrical systems fail. Structural issues develop suddenly. Fire suppression systems malfunction." "Are you threatening us?" Eleanor asked, her voice carrying outrage rather than fear. "We're explaining reality," Harrington replied coldly. "You can profit from cooperation or suffer from resistance, but you cannot prevent what's already in motion." Morgan felt the situation spiraling toward violence and made a desperate decision. "Actually, gentlemen, I think you're the ones who don't understand the reality of your situation." The three men tensed at her change in tone, their expressions shifting from confident intimidation to wary suspicion. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Wise asked, his hand moving closer to his jacket. "I mean that every word you've spoken tonight has been recorded by federal agents," Morgan said, her voice steady despite the danger. "Your extremist network, your government corruption, your threats against American citizens, all of it documented for prosecution." The restaurant erupted into controlled chaos as Agent Reynolds' surveillance team converged on their table from multiple directions. Federal agents with drawn weapons surrounded Harrington, Weiss, and Myers before they could reach for any weapons or attempt to flee. "Federal agents, hands on the table now," Reynolds commanded, her professional authority cutting through the confusion. The look of shocked betrayal on Myers' face as he was handcuffed provided Morgan with a moment of pure satisfaction amidst the adrenaline surge. His carefully constructed facade of legitimate business development crumbled as agents recited the litany of charges: conspiracy to operate illegal paramilitary facilities, corruption of government officials, extortion, and threats against federal witnesses. "You have no idea what you've interfered with," Harrington snarled as agents secured him. "This network involves people far more powerful than small-town federal agents." "Then they'll have excellent accommodations in federal prison," Reynolds replied dryly, "along with the rest of your extremist network." As the suspects were led away in handcuffs, Morgan slumped in her chair, the tension of the evening finally catching up with her. Eleanor reached over and squeezed her hand, both women processing the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. "Is it over?" Eleanor asked, her voice carrying exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "The immediate threat is over," Reynolds confirmed, approaching their table as the restaurant returned to some semblance of normality. "But there will be trials, testimony, and probably months of legal proceedings. What you've done tonight will help prosecute an extremist network that threatened national security." Dr. Park joined them, his expression carrying professional satisfaction. The recordings captured enough evidence to dismantle their entire network. Sentinel Mountain Resources, Valley Vista Development. The corrupted government officials will be able to prosecute everyone involved. Morgan felt a wave of relief so profound it was almost overwhelming. What happens to our businesses, to the community? The development pressure disappears immediately, Reynolds assured her. With the primary investors in federal custody and their assets frozen, Valley Vista's historic district project is dead. The Heritage District remains exactly as it is. And Zoe? Morgan asked, her maternal concerns paramount despite everything else. Safe and eager to see you, Agent Michaels confirmed, approaching with his phone already dialing. She's been monitoring the operation from our secure location and wants to know if she can finally tell people her mother is a hero. The comment brought tears to Morgan's eyes as the full weight of their ordeal and its successful resolution finally hit her. They had not only survived, but had helped protect their community and potentially national security from a domestic extremist conspiracy. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.